The sound of freedom.
What freedom looks like. This is what freedom looks like. It's the only way I can describe it.
An explosion of victory, a celebration across Egypt.
This is the biggest street party that Cairo may have ever seen.
After 18 days of the People's Revolution, Mubarak is toppled. He is gone, and the nation celebrates. Nightly News begins now.
Revolution in Egypt. This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Tonight, the people of Egypt have toppled their leader. That nation has just been through a titanic struggle. There's been bloodshed, hundreds of deaths and injuries, and chaos. But in the end, it was 18 days of peaceful protest at the heart of this effort to push Hosni Mubarak out of Cairo after 30 years in power. And it succeeded. While a major task lies ahead in governing a nation of 80 million people, the largest in the Arab world, it was an electrifying moment when the Egyptian vice president hastily announced the president was gone. Cairo erupted. Other governments sat up and took urgent notice. And as President Obama put it today, Egypt will never be the same. Cairo is still roiling with excitement and celebration tonight, where our chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel again begins our coverage. Richard, what a day, and good evening.
Good evening. There are still people out in the streets. They are cheering. They are saying, with our souls, with our blood, we sacrifice for Egypt. And they believe with this popular uprising, that is exactly what they have done. The people have risen up and toppled a police state.
It was supposed to be a day of defiance. After Friday prayers, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators gathered in Tahrir Square. They had a message for President Mubarak: no compromise. They would not accept Mubarak's plan to remain in office while transferring authority to his vice president. But by mid-morning, the army seemed to be backing Mubarak, saying it would guarantee his promises of reform would be carried out, and sending a message: the army would make sure the people get democracy. Now go home. But the demonstrators didn't give up. And by the afternoon, they heard their first good news of the day. Mubarak had fled Cairo for Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai Peninsula, even as demonstrators converged on his palace. In the square, word spread that an urgent and important announcement would soon be made on state television. But the protesters didn't expect much. At 6 p.m., Vice President Omar Suleiman, Mubarak's longtime aide and head of intelligence, made a stunning announcement. Just a paragraph long, so quick, Egyptians barely heard it.
Hosni Mubarak has decided to waive the office of the President of the Republic.
But when they did, they realized Hosni Mubarak, President of Egypt for 30 years, was finally stepping down, handing power to the military. Cairo and all of Egypt stood up at once and cheered. Shouts of "Egypt is free" rang across the country.
I'm so happy for today. It's a day in the history of Egypt. We'll never forget it.
And so began the biggest, most joyful, loudest, wildest celebration in Egypt's modern history. It was a moment when Egyptians said they took ownership of their country.
Why are you here? What do you feel today?
This is our today. This is our country. This is my Egypt. This is the revolution.
Taking it back from the secret police that have suppressed free speech and democracy for 3 decades.
I think a clear future, very clear and very bright future will be waiting for us. We are the sons of Egypt, not him. He is not Egyptian.
President Mubarak came to power in 1981. He was sitting next to President Anwar Sadat when he was assassinated by Islamic militants. Mubarak, the Air Force commander and vice president, assumed office under martial law. But Mubarak never repealed that state of emergency and kept it in place to safeguard his position, enrich his family and supporters, and allow the security services to silence any opposition. Today, the people of Egypt freed themselves with help from the military. U.S. officials tell NBC News the Egyptian military broke with Mubarak after his speech last night. Mubarak was expected to resign, but didn't. The 82-year-old president in poor health just couldn't bring himself to do it. Mubarak thought the protest, which he blamed on foreign media and excitable young people, would go away. The military was furious. Senior officers threatened to take off their uniforms and join the protesters. With the military and the people no longer with him, Mubarak was finished. Tonight, the military command announced it had taken charge, but has no intention to stay in power. This council is not a replacement for the legitimacy of the people, said a military spokesman. Then, a poignant salute to the 300 Egyptians who died in this revolt. The army called them martyrs for freedom. Egyptians celebrated into the night. But while the military stepped in, it was these people who drove this largely peaceful and determined revolution. They would accept nothing less than Mubarak's resignation. And tonight, after just 18 extraordinary days, they got it. The Egyptian people are free.
Many Egyptians never thought that they would live to see this day. This is certainly a turning point in this country. And Brian, it could be a turning point for the Middle East.
Richard Engel, along with his few closest friends there in Cairo, Egypt tonight. Richard, we'll get back to you in a little bit. Be careful there. So what must it have been like in that square, in that crowd, during the instant when they heard it was all over? They had toppled President Mubarak from power. Our own Ron Allen was in the square. He was there among the people and has been reporting from there all day. And Ron, as we just saw, they're still going. Saturday is a work day in Egypt, but I guess they can be forgiven an all-nighter.
Indeed, Brian, the sun is going to rise here in a few hours, and there are still hundreds of thousands of people out in the street, families with little kids who are staying up all night. No one is going anywhere. They all want to be there to savor every single moment of this unprecedented moment in the history of this country. Everyone there just wants to be able to say that I was there when this happened, a moment of incredible power and energy, unlike any that you'll probably ever experience in your lifetime, Brian. Just an amazing thing to experience.
And Ron, take a moment yourself and relive this. We want to show folks what it was like for you reporting live from the square when word started to break out.
What freedom looks like. This is what freedom looks like. It's the only way I can describe it. The noise is just absolutely deafening, and it is such a sharp contrast to what happened here last night. It's hard to put to words. It's just an amazing thing. I need to tell President Mubarak, you have ugly face. I don't like to see you again. Freedom! I have rarely seen such joy and such relief. It's an amazing thing to witness. You can see people atop a tank on this side of the square. The soldiers are joining in. It's freedom. That's all you can say.
I can't believe it. Finally, after 30 years of oppression, I'm speechless.
There are people here, so many in their 20s and 30s, who feel like their lives are just now going to be so profoundly different. College students who feel like their degrees are now worth something. Young professionals who feel like all the work they put in will now amount to so much more. Parents who think that their kids will now have such a better life. Why are people putting their children up on the tank?
Oh, it's a big day. Everyone wanted to have a memory here.
This night is something that so many people here never dared dream might happen in their lifetime.
I really don't know what's going to happen next. I'm happy, but a bit scared.
We're looking at a cross-section of the society that has been fundamentally changed. It's called Liberation Square for a reason, and you really understand that now.
And Ron Allen, what a day for you to witness down there.
So many incredible acts of courage and determination, Brian. It was really, truly inspiring. For so long, people said Liberation Square was the only place they felt free in this country, and now that feeling is sweeping this entire ancient land.
All right, Ron Allen, after a great day of reporting, stay loose. We may ask you to go rescue Richard Engel from that crowd. Ron, thanks. At the Obama White House last night and today, the ongoing effort, don't forget to try to play this right and then get the reaction to Mubarak's departure right. And our chief White House correspondent, Chuck Todd, was there for all of it. Chuck, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Well, the president was in a meeting with some other senior advisors when he was interrupted and told about the Mubarak resignation. He then did what so many of us did and just went outside to a television and watched all of those scenes unfold that we've seen Ron and Richard experience. And in fact, you could tell that the scenes of what he was watching influenced what he told the country later this afternoon.
This is the power of human dignity, and it can never be denied. Egyptians have inspired us, and they've done so by putting the lie to the idea that justice is best gained through violence. Egypt has played a pivotal role in human history for over 6,000 years. But over the last few weeks, the wheel of history turned at a blinding pace as the Egyptian people demanded their universal rights.
It was significant what the president didn't say. He didn't use this speech today, Brian, to talk about a new Middle Eastern policy having to do with Saudi Arabia or Jordan or protecting Israel, saying things like that. He chose today, and the administration said today is about Egypt. Today is about their day, their freedom, and they wanted to let that be what everybody talked about and what the president talked about, Brian.
All right, Chuck Todd, what a day this was at the White House. Thanks. And like him or not, police state or not, Hosni Mubarak was a U.S. ally for 30 years, roughly the last 5 U.S. presidents. And now for the U.S., the question of what Egypt will become and how to deal with it. More on that from White House correspondent Savannah Guthrie in Washington. Hey, Savannah, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. You said it. Mubarak was so central to U.S. policy in the Middle East. Some say the administration was unprepared for a post-Mubarak era. But that era is now here, ready or not. The two presidents in Cairo in 2009.
I'm very much looking forward in the months and years to come to continue to consult with the president.
4 years, Hosni Mubarak was the bedrock of American policy in the Middle East. U.S. presidents came and went. He didn't.
Egypt was free!
As they celebrated in Queens, New York's Little Egypt today, across Washington, a collective question. What now? U.S. officials' biggest worry, chaos, a power vacuum that could allow extremists to flood across the border.
The problem will lie if the Egyptian revolution gets hijacked, gets taken over by some much more radical element.
U.S. officials are counting on the Egyptian military to hold the country together until elections can be held. But remembering the 2006 vote in Gaza that brought radical group Hamas to power, U.S. officials worry about moving too fast. Moderate political factions were never allowed to flourish under Mubarak's iron fist.
There's much work to be done. This is the beginning of that process, not the end of it.
The U.S. also must now reassure allies. Israel worries a new radical regime could throw out the 1979 peace agreement. And Egypt sits amidst a region full of autocratic leaders wondering what's next for them. The U.S. hopes the Egypt example will encourage them to make democratic reforms, not crack down harder. And perhaps sensing an opportunity, the administration today made a point to encourage Iran's protest movement.
Let your people speak. Release your people from jail. Let them have a voice.
Well, some Arab allies have expressed anger with the administration for not standing more firmly behind a longtime ally. The president will be spending time on the phone doing more diplomacy in the coming days and weeks, Brian.
All right, Savannah Guthrie in our D.C. newsroom, thanks. And now to a big angle of this. Imagine how other countries throughout the Middle East are watching this. Put it this way, the largest Arab nation in the world just changed hands. So how does that now affect the balance of power? We go to our veteran in the region, correspondent Martin Fletcher in Tel Aviv tonight. Martin, good evening.
Hi, Brian. Well, the balance of power is changing. And for anybody who really wants democracy in the Middle East, it's party time here tonight. Throughout the region, Arabs were in the streets dancing, singing. They spoke of the winds of change, bringing democracy, freedom. And it was almost as if they were there in Cairo themselves. Across the region, people were saying the message, we've done it, brought down a dictator through peaceful people power. Of course, there was a different reaction among the leaders. Their reaction mostly was, who's next? There's almost complete silence from other governments in the region tonight, except for Iran. Iran, which put down its own revolt 2 years ago quite brutally. Iran's president tonight said that the new Middle East will break free, quote, of American interference and doom Israel. Now, of course, Israel is rattled tonight. On the one hand, supporting democracy. On the other, worried what kind of government will come to power in Egypt now. will they continue to support the peace treaty with Israel? Change in the region is already working, against Israel. Turkey, which was a strong ally, is moving away from Israel now towards Iran, towards Syria. And now the most powerful Arab country in the region, Egypt, is at play. So, of course, very worried Israeli leaders in Jerusalem today, looking with great concern at their southern neighbor, Brian.
Be interesting to see what Monday morning brings. Martin Fletcher in Tel Aviv. Martin, as always, thanks. We'll take a break in our coverage here. When we come back, we've been able to relocate Richard Engel in that crowd. We'll talk to him some more in just a moment.